Now, sexual harassment exists in all industries, including the news business. This year's Oscars and Golden Globes gave nods to Bombshell and The Loudest Voice. Both are about the disgraced former Fox News boss, Roger Ailes. Gretchen Carlson was an anchor at the network and was the first to sue him for sexual harassment. And Nicole Kidman portrays her in Bombshell. Take a look at this clip.
In both Iowa and New Hampshire.
You might be able to sue Ailes himself instead of Fox.
And that is why I'm here, because Marty Hyman told me that over here in New Jersey, I can avoid arbitration by suing Roger personally. He says that you've managed to change the law and that we could call other women and show a pattern.
Will other women come forward?
Yes, they will.
Now, Roger Ailes died in 2017, and Carlson's case was eventually settled for $20 million. But it came with a mandatory non-disclosure agreement, or NDA. Together with two other women who sued Fox, Carlson has launched Lift Our Voices to end that silence. And she tells me she's doing it for all women and even men. Gretchen Carlson, welcome back to our program.
Thanks for having me again.
So I wanted just to get to the Harvey Weinstein trial very quickly. Given the fact that you broke this dam before even Me Too, I guess, how do you feel that this is coming to trial? It's not your issue, but it's relevant. And what do you think is the best that these plaintiffs can expect to get from going to trial?
Yeah, well, listen, there wouldn't be a trial unless there was the bravery of all of these women coming forward. And so that's the first thing that I have to acknowledge and say how brave and courageous they are. Unfortunately, when women go to trials like this and they have to testify, they're going to be torn down. And that's what I'm trying to continue to change in our culture, is that we should approach this completely differently. We should be celebrating the women who come forward. Now, I understand that, you know, he may go to prison for a long time, so his lawyers are going to try and tear them down. But culturally, we have to change the way that we look at these women. We need to look at them as heroes and not as people who've done anything wrong.
So let's flesh that out a bit, because you are really working hard on this. I mean, not only did you break the story and come forward in your own company and basically outed the top leadership of your company, but you've also now got this experience, Lift Our Voices, about the NDAs, the non-disclosure agreements. That's something you had to sign yourself when you settled. Given that a lot of people do get persuaded, like you did, to sign an NDA, why have you decided that this is not the way forward now? And how are you trying to get out of your own NDA?
Yeah, so it's complicated. Listen, 3.5 years ago, when I sued Roger Ailes, the chairman of Fox News, had I known that we would be in this cultural revolution right now and that my jumping off the cliff would potentially lead to this latest, state of affairs that are so different than it was before, then I would have fought really, really hard to not sign my NDA. But I look at this now as the latest phase of this revolution. We've come very far in the last 3.5 years with regard to believing women, men facing consequences when they are the perpetrator, men losing their jobs, culture understanding that we hadn't fixed this problem yet. So the next phase, as far as all the work that I've been doing in trying to change laws on Capitol Hill and otherwise, is to get rid now of non-disclosures. We should look at this completely differently. We should no longer silence women and handcuff them. We should let them tell their stories.
So let me quote a little bit of what you wrote in an op-ed for the New York Times on this issue in December. None of us expected or wanted a workplace dispute. We were simply the ones who had the ability and the courage to speak up, and for that we lost our jobs. We have a right to say what is factually correct or incorrect about what happened. We have a right to our voices and our truths. I urge executives of Fox to do what's right and take this step today for the sake of all women in every workplace. Well, first and foremost, have they released you from your NDA?
No, we have not heard back from them, but we continue to reach out. And really, this came on the heels of NBC deciding that they were going to allow women who had signed NDAs with their company to purportedly be released from them. And so then that night when we heard that, several of us at Fox who had to sign these NDAs in order to get these, our resolution, we got together and we said, well, we're going to demand that Fox also release us from our NDAs. So that was about 2 months ago. Since then, that was what organically flowed into us creating this new nonprofit, Lift Our Voices, on behalf of all women and men all across the world, so that they will no longer be silenced.
And we, of course, reached out to Fox, knowing that we're interviewing you about this topic, and they haven't got back to us either. But I wonder what it feels like for you now to see a movie that's got an Oscar nod. This is Bombshell. Nicole Kidman plays you. We saw the clip in the introduction to you. We've had the series called The Loudest Voice about Roger Ailes. You know, your experience, which was Me Too before Me Too, has had so much publicity, so much part of the mainstream, you know, cultural touchstones in terms of entertainment. And yet, because of your NDA, you weren't even allowed to consult with them on the films. You couldn't point out what was wrong or right. I guess walk us through and our audience what it's like to be at the center of a storm and not even be able to describe what you went through.
Well, thank you for teeing it up that way, Christiane, because, you know, that is my reality. The fact of the matter is that that's incredibly frustrating because Hollywood, as you know, and I know, you know, they take liberties with real life stories, but to not be able to even say, well, that didn't really happen that way. And, you know, well, that's not really how that played out. You know, that's frustrating. But look, I have to take the high road while I continue to do all this advocacy work to make a better world for other women moving forward. I have to take the high road and say, these projects are continuing the discussion about harassment in the workplace. And 3 years ago, if you and I would have been having a conversation saying, hey, I think they're going to do a miniseries and a Hollywood movie about harassment in the workplace, we would have laughed at each other because nobody was interested in talking about it. So big picture, this is continuing the dialogue. This is encouraging more women to feel secure and confident in coming forward. And even if only 1 or 2 more women go to these movies and watch the miniseries and they say, I'm also going to come forward, then it's worth it. And so that's the way that I look at these projects. It may be too late for me to get out of my NDA and actually make another movie or write another book or whatever the case is. But I'm doing this effort with Lift Your Voices, Lift Our Voices, for other women. That's what this is really about. This is about the woman making $25,000 a year, you know, working in a small town in Louisiana or in London or wherever the case may be, and they don't have the platform that I have to come forward and to make a change and make a difference. I'm working on behalf of those women who have been silenced because they need every dime to simply make it through the next week.
Okay, so let me just be cheeky then. Give me a nod if you think that Nicole Kidman did a great job portraying you in Bombshell.
And you're proving my point, Christiane. I can't even tell you the accuracy of this project or not.
And you can't even nod.
So that, I can't even nod.
So, you know, what do you say then to those women who are often the lawyers who say that they're really there to help the victims and the plaintiffs in these cases and who end up urging their clients to precisely do, you know, sign NDAs, take the money and run?
Yeah, I totally disagree with that. Listen, we need to approach the way in which we handle these stories and these cases completely differently than we have in the past, 180 degrees differently. So, for example, if you're being harassed in the workplace and you think you're doing the right thing by going to complain, what's the first reaction? The first reaction is, oh, we got to get rid of the woman who came forward and complained. And at all costs, we're going to protect the predator or the perpetrator. And so we're going to get this woman out of here, and then we'll be back to business as usual. We need to say to the woman when she comes forward, we're going to look into this. We take this seriously. And if she's telling the truth and if she has evidence and if they do an investigation, then they get rid of the perpetrator and they celebrate the woman. They don't make her sign an NDA and have her shipped off to never work again in her chosen profession. This is the way we need to culturally look at this completely differently. And in that scenario, you don't need a non-disclosure.
Well, tell me then about how NDAs and the reason for them has shifted over the years, because apparently originally it was about, you know, not disclosing confidential information. I mean, it was a very high bar required for an NDA to be proffered or to be legitimate. And now you say, and we read, that many companies use NDAs just to, I don't know, cover up, silence rather frequent allegations of misconduct, harassment, and all sorts of things like that. I mean, how prevalent is it, this notion of NDAs?
This is so prevalent. Over the last 2 decades, We've gotten to the point where, at least in America, 1/3 of all Americans are forced to sign NDAs upon employment. So let's think about that for a moment. When you start a new job, you do not expect to get into any kind of a dispute at work. I know I didn't, but I had already signed an NDA at that point in time just to be able to start that job. So on its face, we have to change the way that we do that. And you're right. It used to be that NDAs were because, look, you're not going to give away company secrets. And I totally understand why NDAs in those situations are appropriate. But now companies have figured out that they can just do a blanket NDA, which covers discrimination, harassment, assault, abuse, all of the things that are human rights violations that were never intended to be swept under the rug with these NDAs. And that's what we're trying to change. As you know, I've been working on Capitol Hill here in America for the last 3 years to also get rid of arbitration clauses in employment contracts, which is the other way that we silence women in these situations. So now I'm working on both fronts. I'm going to get rid of arbitration. I'm very confident that we're going to get a bill passed on this. And now lift our voices, also eradicating NDAs. If we can get rid of these two things, Christiane, we will significantly change the way in which this world approaches harassment in the workplace and the way in which we solve this issue once and for all.
And you're lifting it even higher because you're urging all the presidential candidates to get on board as well. So Gretchen Carlson, thank you so much for joining us, and thanks for your work.
Thank you for having me.